welcome back to our web series titled Grants 101. Today, we are going to be following up from where we left off last time. Last time, we had with us Shazeb Irshad, who is a grants expert and also project management expert. He talked to all of you about how to identify grants and build a grant tracker. Today, we're going to go into more detail on developing the technical methodology of a grant. And with that, I would also like to introduce our panelists today. We have Shazeb Irshad with us again, who is our grant specialist, and we are welcoming back with us Rabel Mirza, who is an impact measurement specialist. We have a slight change up in the way we're going to be running the episode today, and we'll talk to you a little bit later about that. We'll first walk you through the agenda today. So I've already introduced today's panelists, and the way we're going to be structuring today's episode is that we're talking about how to assess if your organization is ready to bid for and secure a grant. And one of the most important parts of writing a grant proposal is to be able to construct an effective technical methodology. And part of that technical methodology is being able to define why your organization came into being. Even if it came into being on an organic basis, some form and structure is necessary to be able to define your impact and your basic goalposts that you need to reach in order to achieve your impact. And so for that, we will walk you through the required process on how to build your organization's objectives and then how to finalize your objectives that go into the technical methodology of a grant. So with that, Shazeb, I would like to ask you if you could share with our viewers maybe 3 or 4 top takeaways or requirements that are the fundamentals that any organization must have in place before they even consider writing a grant and filing for grant funding.
Great. Assalamu alaikum. It's great to be back here. And whenever grants is being considered, I think it's important that we actually create a system for the entire process, because it not only saves time, but also helps save the funds that organizations sorely need. So they shouldn't actually spend more funding on acquiring the grant than the funds that they actually need. So going forward, grant readiness actually is something that's very simple to do, and it's actually based on 3 very important things. The first is the genesis of your organization. So the year that it started in and the express purpose for which it started. And the last is the beneficiaries. So as long as you're familiar with why your organization was started, when it was started, what were the beneficiary types and what impact it has had, it is very easy to create the readiness documentation. So as we talked about the year that it started, then you have the tax documentation. So you should be properly audited. You should have all the audit reports. Then all of the people who are on your board, what are their qualifications? If the board of the members of the board are actually providing any monetary contributions to the nonprofit. And then objectives for why you started, what your future plans are. And then again, as I talked about, were the beneficiaries. So you should have as detailed of demographics about your beneficiaries as possible. So for example, the gender ratio, the age range, the income analysis. For example, 50% of our beneficiaries come from socioeconomic class C or D, and what were the reasons why you started to focus on them. And as long as you have this information, whatever background information any grant proposal might require of you, it will be very easy for you to recreate that. So that sums up the grant readiness. I also have a grant readiness document which details all the different formats that you should have. And if anyone is interested, they can drop a comment below in the episode with their email address, and we'll be sure to send it to them. Over to you, Mahal.
Thank you, Shazeb. That was very comprehensive. And as I mentioned in the intro, and Shazeb also just mentioned here, it's very important for you to get from the founder's mind the objectives of why he or she started an organization, and what is their 3 to 5 year goal post, what is their 10-year goal post, and what is it that they hope to achieve in the beneficiary realm when they may cease to exist, that they've created such an impact that the need for their existence is no longer there. That could be a 20-year goal. With that, I'm going to introduce today's format, which is a slight change up from last time. We're going to be doing a live demo for all of you to make it interesting. I am going to be playing the role of a moderator here and also provide input in my capacity as a strategy and M&E specialist. Shazeb is going to be playing his role of a grant specialist. Rabel is going to be acting as a founder of a newly formed organization that I'm going to now give the platform to her. She's going to talk to us about her organization, why she founded it, and then we will help her build her technical methodology and see where she is at in terms of her grant readiness for applying for a grant funding round. Rabel, over to you. Please introduce yourself and your organization and the role that you're going to be playing today. And I want to inform our viewers this is a fictitious organization. It has no basis in reality. It is an academic case that we put up and created for all of you here. Over to you, Rabel.
Thank you so much. And it's great to be here and wearing this hat of an entrepreneur today. So, as the CEO of Khelkood, I wanted to kind of share a little bit about why I started this organization. So, of course, as all of us, my kids are also in a good school, and they have all sorts of sports facilities, a big playground, after school facilities, plus very trained coaches that help them build that fitness. And I can personally see how it's helped their confidence and so on. When I see other schools and other kids, and maybe, when my helps kids come over to play with my son, I noticed the difference in fitness and stamina. So this was kind of a pain point in my heart, which made me start Khelkood 2 years ago. And I wanted to introduce cricket in underserved schools in urban areas around us. So I started very small. I started to hire coaches to train students after school. We are active currently in 4 schools in urban locations. And currently our operations have about a budget of 8 million rupees a year. So that's the short summary of Khelkood.
Thank you so much, Rabel. And it sounds like a very exciting venture. And I think there's a great need in urban centers to be running this kind of program. And children, I also see all around us, are children underprivileged and under-resourced settings don't have access to the kind of sporting facilities that their more privileged counterparts may have. And that often affects their physical fitness, their mental well-being. So I think the need is certainly there. So you've chosen a great area to work in. Now, my question to you is, what is it that Shazeb and I can help you with? What are you looking to do? How can we be of assistance to you today in today's session?
Right, good question. So as I mentioned, it's a small startup, and we've had a lot of organic growth, and we've, firsthand seen so many good outcomes. It's not just that sports helps them in health outcomes and fitness, but I've also seen that the kids improve their negotiation, teamwork, confidence building. And now we know that 4 schools is not enough. We need to expand. We need to go bigger. And I'm thinking that we have a big gap, especially in a big city like Karachi. So I want to, and crowdsourcing donations is not really working out. So we need to have some sort of a strategic growth, and we need investment. Perhaps I think we need a cricket academy, because we don't have all the schools that we're talking about, these underprivileged schools, they don't have the right kind of space. Even if I wanted to expand what I'm currently doing, I can't necessarily go into every school I want. They don't have playgrounds, or they don't have those teachers or coaches available to go there. And when you do outside school, after school trainings, they don't necessarily get formalized into the kids' lives long term. So I really think we need to build a cricket academy where more kids can come from schools that don't have the spaces or resources. So I need to go from X to Y. I need you to help me figure that out.
We would be happy to do that, because that's what we are here to assist with today. But before we actually jump into that, Rabel, and before we go straight into building technical methodology and helping you identify funders who may be able to fund an enterprise like this, my question to you is, when you developed this, or when you were brainstorming about it, did you think about developing a theory of change, or are you even familiar with what a theory of change is?
No, I mean, I've heard the concept. I really don't know what the building blocks of that look like. But the thing is that in bits and pieces in social media, we've written about it. We've even had an article about it. But to be very, very honest with you, it's largely in my head. And we've just been pushed into growth organically. So the short answer is no, I don't have a theory of change.
All right. So I just want to now use this as a case study for our viewers, that what Rabel is saying in her role as founder of Khelkood is true of a number of organizations around the world. They start organically. They don't necessarily have the theory of change written down as often in their minds. So it needs to the process, and it's all right to retrofit a theory of change in an organization that has emerged based on an organic need. So that's what we're going to do today. And with that, Shadeb, I would request that perhaps it would be beneficial for our viewers and for Rabel if we help build the problem tree for her, which forms the basis of getting to a theory of change. What is your opinion and your experience on this, Shadeb?
Sure, absolutely. So, what tends to happen is that organizations that start organically more often than not find themselves in a position where, after a year or two, they find themselves out of funds. Not only that, they also have embarked on a course of action that wasn't data driven. So, for example, if an organization started organically and they went in a particular direction, they never really thought if that was the best direction to go into and if it would have the impact that they really desired. In addition to that, in the absence of a theory of change, even if they want to retroactively check their impact, it would be very difficult because essentially working without a theory of change is basically like shooting an arrow in the dark, and wherever the arrow lands, you paint a bullseye around it and say, we've hit our goal. So rather than doing that, it is always best to first figure out exactly what it is that you would like to achieve. And then that also helps define your grant strategy. So once we understand exactly what direction and impact metric that Khelkood is really going to be investing itself in, we can actually look for requisite funding opportunities, because not only will it be a beneficial partnership for Khelkood, but also for the donor organization that is coming in with the clarity of mind of what they will get if they invest their money in this organization.
I think Shazeb has also given you his perspective based on the number of organizations that he interacts with in his career. So with that, Shazeb, if we could share with our viewers what the skeleton of a problem tree looks like, and we will help walk Rabel through her problem tree, which will then lead to her objectives tree. So here I just want to talk to the viewers a little bit about, it's very important that you first define the problem, you frame the problem. So we will talk to Rabel about what she's talked to us about her motivation for setting up this program, and that's what we need to frame as the problem. We need to frame it clearly. Once you frame the problem clearly, you are halfway there. Then you use a cause and effect pathway using this focal problem. And Shazeb, with that, I think we can share a template of a problem tree to enable our viewers to understand. It's a very simple process. It's a logical cause and effect pathway. So, Rabel, I would like to just brainstorm with you. You mentioned that it's all in your head. So, our role is to get it out of your head onto a piece of paper and help you define your strategic objectives, out of which later we will help you define, like Shazib said, your impact metrics. And based on that, then we know what exactly it is that your rationale and your objectives is, and we can help identify the right kind of grant for you that we should then help you file for. So the first building block is that we put that down. What was your motivation? And your motivation should tie in with your beneficiary population. So your problem was inadequate sporting facilities for youth, and your beneficiary population is limited to underprivileged and under-resourced schools. If we were to only say inadequate sporting facilities for youth, we would not be framing the problem correctly, because then it would refer to all youth, which is not what you're targeting. So it's important that you frame the problem with the correct words. Now,
to qualify it.
Yes, we must qualify it. It's very important. Because it helps you build then the correct pathway. If you qualify it wrong, you can build an inaccurate pathway, which is what Shazeb was also mentioning earlier, that you can go off in one tangent and then not be able to define what your impact is. Okay, so if I were to ask you, what are some of the causes of this inadequacy for underserved and under-resourced schools?
I mean, one of the big one is that there isn't any program in schools. They are very academic. They're very heavily go by the curriculum. So there's no space in the curriculum or in the program for the schools to have those facilities in the first place. The other thing is, where there is a willingness to do so, there isn't any space to do so. So, I mean, as I mentioned, a lot of the schools are in very cramped spaces, and they're barely one or two rooms. So where you want to start a program, there is no space to do so.
Right. Okay. So we could put down the second cause as there's inadequate space in schools and that they're cramped.
I also think that the absence of any teachers specifically hired for sports, or because teaching sports is not in someone's job description at these schools. So I think if that problem could be somehow solved, it would definitely involve or contribute to students getting more time to play.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other things, Rabil, because you mentioned that the kids are playing cricket. Now, cricket still requires a bat, ball, space. So I think as we start thinking about your objective, we also need to getting you to think about what are some of the other sports that children could play in cramped settings with and more team-based sports than one-on-one sports, and sports that could be played in the absence of sports teachers, because as Shazeb has very rightly identified, there are no sports teachers and there are no resources to hire sports teachers. And your model may be hiring teachers, but we'll then need to start questioning you, that is, how viable is it for you to be placing your own hired teachers in these schools. Now, Rabil, you mentioned that there are no in-school or after-school sports programs for underserved schools. What is one of the effects that you can think of that may happen as a result of this cause?
If you don't have after-school programs, or if you don't have space, or if you don't have the equipment, what ends up happening is underprivileged or underserved kids end up not developing skills for sports. Their physical fitness, their negotiation skills, their confidence, and so on. All these other character building traits that are also not present in these underserved children.
Right. Okay. So I think that should have given our viewers a good idea of how to build the problem tree. I just want to remind our viewers that this is a very simplified example, and as Shazeb has been describing to you, we have done reviewed some causes and some effects right here. You can take the problem tree to as much detail as you like, and you can have sub problems and then sub causes here. So you can make it very detailed and then choose the problems, choose the causes that you want to work with. For example, if you've identified two causes and you say, okay, these are the ones we want to limit ourselves to, the problem tree allows you to do that. And that's what the tool is for. To take that out of the founder's head or the program team's head, put it down on paper and do what is called an options analysis. Choose which options you want to exercise and then build your objectives tree from that. With that, we would like to now move to the next step. So we've helped you construct a problem tree, Rabil. So this is what your problem tree would basically look like. We have identified the constraints that you're working with and the effects that those constraints are having on your beneficiary population. Shazib, if we could share with our viewers the next step, which is basically converting the problem statement into an objective statement. And here I want to remind our viewers that it's very important to frame the problem, because the solution comes from the problem. You just don't build a solution out of your head. If you see that we took Rabil, the founder of the organization, through the whole walkthrough process. What was the rationale? We did the cause and effect pathway. From that, we will create now a live demo to do an objective tree. So this is what the blank template of the objectives tree would look like. Now, Rabil, I would like to ask you that you identified some causes for us, and one of the causes that you identified was no in-school or after-school sports program. Can you convert that into a positive objective and say what is it that your organization is doing to address this constraint?
So, in my view, it should have been, as Shazib also mentioned, having teachers in existing schools not the best solution. And I think what we should need to do is have a cricket academy, so we're not reliant on spaces inside schools or equipment inside schools. This is something that I think we should provide.
Excellent dream to have. Shazib, what is your opinion on Rabil jumping from 4 schools and her sustainability being in question to Rabil suddenly moving towards setting up a cricket academy?
Yeah, I think that's let's say it's a 10-year goal rather than a 1-year goal. And there are a lot of steps that are needed to actually get to that phase. Because essentially, when the sustainability is in question, you will have to do two things simultaneously. The first is to figure out what to do with the things that actually are in your control. So, for example, you might think that you're creating impact right now, but what that impact is, and in order to get from your current state to whatever the goal is, and if that goal is to get an academy, we first need to understand if that academy would really help you amplify that impact. So once we go through that exercise, we will get a better understanding of that. And even if it is, then we need to take your current impact metrics into account and then map them out into getting to that academy stage.
So, Rabil, what our role is to help you say, okay, this part of your dream is achievable now, and this part of your dream is achievable in 10 years. And the fundamental mistake, which a lot of organizations make, is that they try and jump right at their 10-year goal within 2 or 3 years of inception. that can have a serious impact on your institutional systems and your viability. So let's look at slightly immediate to medium term goals, and we can leave your cricket academy there. We'll put it there in our history and say that eventually Rabail wants to get there. What is it that we can do in schools immediately? I know you said you're already having children play cricket in schools, but cricket requires space, remember? Anything else that comes to your mind for space constrained infrastructure?
So you're right. I mean, I've shown you the dream. Now you showed me the pathway to it. But the building blocks for the cricket academy is essentially what would be that it would have a sports curriculum. There would be trained teachers, and that there would be equipment there that does not require a lot of space in the schools. So
Okay.
if you can achieve that without the academy, then let's see how that can play out.
Shazeb, would you like to share, based on your experience of working with other organizations, what it is we can help Rabail put down as
Yes.
her short to medium term objectives, which doesn't compromise her dream?
Yes. So the one key thing that Rabil just mentioned is a curriculum. So I think if we can double down on that and say that based on Khelkood's experience over the last 2 years, they've realized what are some of the things that can be converted into academic programming that would allow kids to be able to play, let's say, in a confined environment, because let's face it, a confined environment is something that all low-cost private schools or public schools really do have. And in addition to that, we can also say that that curriculum will also inculcate abilities such as resilience, teamwork, leadership through sports. That will actually be something that will not only get her interest from donor organizations that want to work in sports, but also from organizations that want to work education reforms in general. So you'll be improving or expanding your donor pool that way.
Okay, excellent idea. So I think what Shazeb has helped you do right here, Rabail, is not lose sight of your dream, but make it a little more achievable. So we work with a sports curriculum, which may or may not, I mean, it can continue to include cricket, but we include low cost, high value sports and mobility exercises, which keep the children moving. It could even be a simple exercise like playing catch. Even playing catch is a sport. It's maybe not a very high caliber sport. Doing these kinds of exercises and even playing with a frisbee or whatever else it may be, you build children's mobility, you build their teamwork skills, and you don't necessarily require high caliber sports coaches, which you are funding to go into these schools, or requiring that you place paid sports teacher into these schools, which is not viable at all. Because if you're working with public sector underserved schools, you need to work with that system and build a low cost, high value proposition for them that adds to their bottom line. It makes their children more mobile. It gives them more developed physical fitness and mental well-being skills, which they may not otherwise be getting from inside the classroom. And you could potentially work with their own teachers. We could, for example, develop with you a capacity building program. Shazeb, what do you think about this for their existing teachers?
Absolutely, because what would happen essentially is that when you're creating a curriculum and that curriculum also includes soft skills like resilience and leadership, you will need to have facilitators to build that capacity in kids. It would help you get to that medium term goal, which is to improve relationships with schools so that schools can embark upon you for larger and more complex projects and think of you as an actual partner rather than an organization that just wants to put down funding and they're not really sure of what your intentions are. Is it marketing that you want? Is it that their infrastructure that you will be using to build up your own brand? So it is always best to start with small steps that actually use the current infrastructure and help your partners to actually see the value that you're adding to their infrastructure and how that actually helps them improve whatever they're doing.
Absolutely. And I think you're not asking for too much extra time commitment from their teachers. That's something you have to keep in mind, that if we build a model where we train the existing government school teachers, you need to see who is more willing, who is more interested. And in terms of design, work with schools where your head teachers are more interested in doing this kind of activity with the kids, because that will reduce the resistance and the pushback from the school.
Yes. So I think by engaging in this exercise, we've come up with a few parameters. The first is that whatever we create has to be built primarily for the teachers, because the teachers will be our medium to get to the students. Secondly, whatever we create needs to require the least amount of material resources. So for example, maybe we could focus on team sports. because then when you have a lot of people, you may not need the equipment. And thirdly, you should also be able to execute the said curriculum in space constrained environments. So once you have all of these things together, then you can actually create a project or a stream that would not only create sustainability for your organization, but would also give you a programmatic edge that other organizations working in the space might not have.
I think those are very valid points, Shazib. And what I would like to add is that we build on this and use them as the building blocks to get to her cricket academy. But for that, what we do is, like you said, we will build credibility with the public sector schools, we will build credibility with their teachers, with the relevant education departments. And then maybe we can enable you to be in a position where you can ask them for a dedicated premises, which is an in-kind contribution, say by the government, to actually then set up a sports facility for these children so that you can impact a larger number of children. But that's at a later stage once you have built the credibility in a certain number of schools. So we would urge you to first build that model, perfect it, showcase it, take the evidence to the government and to other stakeholders and other donors, and that will enable you to get to your cricket academy goal, hopefully within 10 years. Are there any questions, Ravel? Because I know this is a lot of information to be.
My first thought is that perhaps this could reduce the amount of funding I need and still help me achieve the dream of reaching 100,000 children in a leaner way. I'm curious to see when you put this all together, what it looks like.
This is what it comes out to be.
Okay, so here I would just like to show you, Rabil, how this works. So we talked about an in-school sports curriculum. So we moved you out of just cricket. So our focus is the curriculum. It could have cricket, it could have other team sports, and like we discussed, sports that work in a space-constrained infrastructure and then also in a cost-constrained infrastructure, so that it doesn't require too much cash outlay from anybody. So we introduce team-based sports. This, as you see, this is the main objective and this is the sub-objective. And we can take you through a longer process at a later time if you so wish. And this will then form the basis of your objectives, your strategic objectives.
How does this connect to the problems we started with?
Okay, very good question. I'm just going to take you there. Let me just walk you through quickly that it will, in your sports curriculum, it would be useful for you to, because one of the things you started out with, you said that, okay, children don't have the character traits necessarily that sports builds. It could be resilience, teamwork, whatever else it may be, right? So we put that as part of a curriculum. So that's where we started out with. So that's one of the things we address as part of our objectives. Then we don't send in coaches and we don't appoint extra teachers into the school. So it's a lean cost model. We train existing teachers to become facilitators for the sports curriculum. And then as you see, you wanted a sports academy. So we've left that there and you see a question mark there. So it may remain part of a higher level objective, but in terms of immediate level objectives, if you could work on items number 1, 2, and 3, it may help you to then get to number 4 in a more structured manner. And so these will become the objectives of your program. We will help you then in a later stage define what the hierarchy of these objectives would be. Achieving these objectives would define your indicators. For example, if you introduce a sports curriculum, the fact that if the sports curriculum is introduced to develop sports skills, that becomes the indicator, how you track the success of this objective. If your curriculum has resilience and teamwork, the character traits of physical fitness, etc., teamwork should be built. And then how you track these, whether or not this has happened, we will subsequently talk to you because this becomes part of your theory of change. And you build the existing teacher's capacity to impart sports to your. So this is a low cost model which still achieves the impact that you wanted your beneficiary population to achieve. Do you have any questions or any clarifications that you may want from us on this?
So I was just thinking, if you put that together, is this the theory of change? Can I just go and run with it?
So the basics are there. Now you see these are different objectives, and the hierarchy of objectives in terms of what is a higher level objective, what is a lower level objective, you will need to define, and we will work with you. And I think you have given us a great idea for our next episode. We will work with you on how to now dovetail this into a structured theory of change and basically then lead to a framework that allows you to put in impact metrics as well, which is what Shazeb is saying is very important. And I agree, because if you're not able to demonstrate success and not able to chart it, it's very hard to file for funding. Do you have a question, Shazeb?
Yes. So in addition to let's say, clarifying your strategy for what it should be to get to your 10-year goal. Such an exercise is also very instructive when you're trying to cut down your costs, because essentially it is about getting to the crux of what your organization really wants to achieve. So, had you wanted a big cricket academy, what you may have done is to basically start with a small cricket academy, go on a donations drive, then go on to a bigger one, and on the wheel will go. The problem with that approach is that when you go for grant funding opportunities, there are two things that are very hard to get funding for: continuous operating expenditure for a big project, and projects that do not contribute to any impact goal. So, for example, there are many impact metrics that donor organizations follow on a global basis. There are sustainable development goals, which are 17 at the moment, and each goal can be subdivided into smaller goals. But then again, as long as you don't show your alignment with any of those global standards, it will be very hard for you to not only showcase your impact, but also to garner support for it. So, my advice would be to always have a plan for how you're strategically adding to the impact, and how that impact doesn't make your donors feel like they're just putting their money in a bottomless pit. So create smaller projects, and as long as you keep on building on those projects, you should be able to keep getting grant funding for your projects.
Absolutely. It would be useful, Rabel, for you to understand that here is our problem tree. Our problem tree used a cause and effect pathway. So first we framed the problem, which is in the center. Then we discussed what are the causes of the problem. Then we discussed what are the effects of those problems. Then we moved the focal problem into a focal solution right here in the center. So you put a positive spin. And like I said, you remember that the solution of every problem lies within the problem itself. And so you frame the solution here, then you do the objectives of your solution, which means you turn your causes into positive statements. And those become your objectives. Your hierarchy of objectives we will do at a later stage, which will then fall into your theory of change. And when you achieve those objectives and how success will be measured will become your indicators right here, which is what you are doing. For example, if your objective is to introduce an in-school sports curriculum, the fact that the sports curriculum has been introduced to develop sports skills will become your aligned indicator. I think for now, this may be a lot of information overload for both you as well as our viewers. I just want to now just show you that this is basically the main building block. It's the ground floor. If you're building a house, you've built the ground floor of the theory of change by doing your problems and objectives tree. Next level takes you to the hierarchy of objectives. You go from problem to solution, and therein you have your theory of change, which will then also help you define what your metrics for success will be. And we are always available to help you. If you have any comments, questions, please feel free to put them down on YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever else you are seeing our video, and we would be happy to respond to your questions either on those sites or in subsequent episodes. And feel free to reach out to us for any advice that we can provide to you in this regard. And with that, I would like to thank our panelists today and wrap up the episode. Stay tuned for Theory of Change coming to you soon in episode 4. Thank you and Khuda.